This podcast was produced using artificial intelligence and refined by human editors.
Hello, beautiful travelers. Welcome aboard this journey to the crossroads of the world. I'm Luca.
And I am Lara, ready to dive into the enchanting maze of Istanbul with all of you listening.
Istanbul, the only city on the planet that can claim a seat across two continents. Aren't we in for a treat today?
Absolutely. Sprawling across Europe and Asia, it's like a living, breathing museum, Luca, with every street corner echoing stories of empires and artisans.
Do you remember our first step in the city, Lara? That powerful aroma of spices being carried by the breeze from the bazaars?
Oh, how could I forget? It was as if Istanbul was giving us a fragrant welcome hug. And then those seagulls over the Bosphorus, such chatty fellows.
Speaking of chatty, that's us. So let's give the listeners a hint of today's menu. We've got sights that defy time, flavors that dance on the tongue, and of course, a few gems that even some locals might overlook.
And Luca, I think it's only fair to warn our listeners about our slight detour to unearth peculiar trivia, no?
Right. We'll dig up the kind of weird facts that make this city tick. But before we get too sidetracked, Lara, tell me, what's your guiding star in Istanbul?
The skyline, Luca, it's a silhouette of minarets and domes against that fiery evening sky. So beautiful it could make a poet out of anyone.
From the Byzantines to the Ottomans, Istanbul's etched in history, and now in the hearts of two podcasters set loose to unveil its splendors.
Dear listeners, we promise to sprinkle in some laughs and plenty of stories that we've collected, like seashells along the Bosphorus.
Lara, isn't it about time we invite them to our favorite iconic sites? I'm quite eager to chat about the wonders awaiting.
Picture this, marble and tile, opulence that whispers tales of empires past. But that's just a tease for our next segment.
We come bearing tales of grandeur, so stay tuned, as next up, we're walking through the doors of the city's most iconic marvels. And now, let's dive into the iconic sights of this mesmerizing city. You simply can't talk about Istanbul without highlighting its historical landmarks.
Absolutely, Luca. And what better place to start than the crown jewel of empires, the Hagia Sophia?
Ah, Hagia Sophia, the epitome of Byzantine architecture. Did you know it was the largest cathedral in the world for nearly 1,000 years?
1,000 years is quite the reign. It's like stepping back in time, walking through its massive doors.
Absolutely. There's this surreal moment when you first look up at the dome with its intricate mosaics glinting in the light.
Oh, the mosaics! They tell such a vivid story. Legends say that the figures in the mosaics would come to life at night.
Now that would be a sight to see. Speaking of nighttime, have you ever noticed how it feels like standing under a canopy of stars when the light hits just right?
That I have. Moving from celestial to divine, we can't overlook the Blue Mosque, with its cascade of domes and 6 slender minarets.
Yeah, the Sultanahmet Mosque, or the Blue Mosque as it's popularly known, rivals the Hagia Sophia in magnificence.
And it's still a functioning mosque. I remember once hearing the call to prayer there. It was like a melody weaving through the air.
I know exactly what you mean. It's captivating, isn't it? Now, shall we step into the opulence of the Ottoman Empire at the Topkapı Palace?
Oh, the palace is a labyrinth of luxury. Legends abound of sultans and their intrigues within those walls.
I bet you're thinking of Sultan Mehmed's notorious sweet tooth, leading to baklava becoming a palace staple?
You caught me. Historical figures. They're just like us with their dessert obsessions.
And how could they not, with the kitchens there? But alongside lavish feasts were brilliant strategic plans, right in the Imperial Council chamber.
Indeed, if those walls could talk. But not too far from there lies something that speaks of history's depths, literally. The Basilica Cistern.
That underground marvel. When you walk on the wooden platforms, water rippling below, and the sound of dripping echoes, it feels like another world.
An otherworldly experience, I'd say. And the Medusa heads, mysterious, upside down, always making you wonder how they ended up there.
There are so many legends. One I heard was that they were there to ward off evil spirits.
It makes sense considering the eerie vibe the cistern gives off. Speaking of vibes, the Grand Bazaar and Spice Market are on the opposite spectrum. Lively and vibrant with colors and scents.
Oh, those are a shopper's paradise. Remember our little competition to find the best deal on Turkish lamps?
How could I forget? Your haggling skills are top-notch, but I still think my lamp won on style.
Well, I'll concede your lamp had style, but let's agree that navigating those markets is an adventure in itself.
No argument there. It's a symphony of languages, perfumes of spices mingling with leather, and the shimmer of gold from the jeweler's alley.
Speaking of which, the next time you're there, try the Turkish delight from that small shop we found tucked away. It's otherworldly.
True, not all delights are equal. And speaking of delightful treats, our listeners are in for a treat with our next segment.
Indeed, they are. We'll take our taste buds on a journey and talk about the delicious cuisine of Istanbul that's just as rich as its history. All right, Lara, it's time to dive into a topic that's sure to make our mouths water: the delicious cuisine of Istanbul.
Oh, Luca, where do we even begin? Turkish cuisine is so vast and varied, but let's kick things off with maybe the most important meal of the day: breakfast.
Yes, Turkish breakfast. Or should I say, a feast for the kings and queens that we are.
Absolutely, a spread of cheeses, olives, tomatoes, cucumbers, jams, honey, and can you guess my favorite part?
I know you too well. It's the menemen, isn't it?
Spot on. Scrambled eggs cooked with tomatoes, green peppers, and spices. Just heavenly.
And let's not forget the endless supply of fresh, warm bread. Dip that into some menemen, and you're on cloud 9.
Turkish coffee, though, Luca, it's like they poured all of Istanbul into a tiny cup, intense, rich, and full of character.
And the way it's prepared over the hot sand, it's both a drink and a performance.
I have to confess, the first time I tried it, I didn't know about the grounds settled at the bottom of the cup. Let's just say I learned to read my future in those very grounds.
Moving on from liquid fortunes, let's talk kebabs. I mean, Istanbul could be renamed Kebabstan with the number on offer.
True. But if I had to choose, it's the Iskender kebab for me. Thinly sliced lamb smothered in tomato sauce, over pieces of pita bread, generously slathered with melted sheep butter and yogurt. It's a symphony.
Oh, it sings, Lara, it sings. But for me, it's the Adana kebab. That spicy mince on a skewer gets me every time.
We can't leave out street food. Simit rings, Istanbul's answer to the bagel, encrusted with sesame seeds. They're the perfect on-the-go snack.
I remember you trying to juggle a simit in one hand and your map in the other. The map lost that battle, didn't it?
A delicious defeat. But Luca, the sweets, like Turkish delight and baklava, it's like tasting the stars.
Poetic and true, Lara. Layers of filo pastry, nuts, syrup, and the subtle touch of rosewater or lemon. It's bliss in every bite.
But texture, the crunch, then the chew. It's like a dance for your taste buds set to the rhythm of a darbuka drum.
And what better to wash this down with than a sip of raki, the unofficial national drink? Always surrounded by good company and the clinking of glasses.
A toast to friends and food. Şerefe, as they say. Plus, you can't experience raki without the meyhanes, the taverns where sharing a table means sharing stories.
Those taverns are where a simple meal turns into an unforgettable night. The melange of mazes, seafood, and the chorus of voices, it's the spirit of Istanbul captured indoors.
Speaking of spirit, it looks like we've reached the end of this delectable segment. I'm full just thinking about all this food.
Well, you'll need that energy, Lara, because next up, we're on to the hidden gems of Istanbul. Places you wouldn't find in your typical guidebook.
Oh, the anticipation. There's much more to discuss on Travel with Lara and Luca, so stay with us.
Segment 3, Hidden Gems. So Lara, after covering all that mouth-watering cuisine, it's time to take our listeners on a stroll through Istanbul's hidden gems.
My absolute favorite part, Luca. Istanbul's like a chest full of treasures. You never know what you're going to find until you start digging.
And sometimes you find the most extraordinary places when you just wander off the main streets.
Exactly, like this little place I found last time. Nestled in the back streets of Kadıköy, there's this tiny bookshop, floor to ceiling with rare books. The owner even showed me a first edition Orhan Pamuk.
Lucky you. Speaking of Kadıköy, the Moda neighborhood is just a stone's throw away. There's something about its laid-back vibe and the waterfront that captivates me.
You're a sucker for a seaside stroll, aren't you?
Guilty as charged, but who wouldn't be? taking in the breeze, that view of the Sea of Marmara.
And a bag of freshly roasted chestnuts in hand.
Now you're talking. That's the perfect hidden gem, the side of Istanbul that doesn't shout for your attention, but whispers for you to come closer.
Speaking of whispers, there's this little courtyard I stumbled upon near Galata. It's a whole different world. Luca, right in the middle of the madness.
I think I know the one, with the vines crawling up the walls.
That's the one. You step in there and it's like the city noise just fades away.
Istanbul is so full of these wonderful little nooks, like Arnavutköy with its beautiful Ottoman houses.
Oh, those wooden facades, the intricate details, if those walls could talk, huh?
They would tell stories of a time gone by, stories we can only imagine when we roam the old streets.
Balat is another neighborhood that feels like a living museum. It's like walking through a painting with those colorful houses.
And sometimes you bump into the most charming characters, right?
You mean like that old gentleman who gave us that impromptu tour of his antique shop?
Ah, yes. He told us the history behind every item as if it were a bedtime story.
Every item had a soul, according to him. You remember that?
How could I forget? I learned more about Istanbul from him than from any guidebook.
But let's not forget Anadolu Hisari. It's quite a trek up there, but so worth it for the view.
Absolutely stunning, looking over the Bosphorus, perched above the trees, surreal.
Not to mention, you get a breathtaking panorama of the city.
Picture perfect, literally. Remember the photo you took? With the city in the background?
I had to. It's not every day we, as you say, stumble upon a hidden gem like that.
Speaking of hidden gems, have you ever been to the Prince's Islands?
They're like a little escape from the hustle and bustle of the city.
Quiet streets, no cars, just the sound of horse-drawn carriages and the sea.
And there's something magical about riding a bike there. You can explore every nook and cranny.
When was the last time you were on a bike before that?
Let's just say it had been a while and leave it at that.
Oh, come on. Did you forget how to pedal?
I'll have you know, I bicycled quite gracefully. Thank you very much.
Fine. Next hidden gem. Have you seen the art installations that pop up in unexpected places around the city?
Those are always a delightful surprise. I love the contemporary flair they add.
It's like the city itself is a canvas, and every so often a new brushstroke appears.
That's what makes Istanbul so endlessly fascinating. You never know what you'll discover next.
It's those little moments, isn't it? Finding a new painting or sculpture just around the corner.
Like that cafe we found tucked away behind the alleys of Beşiktaş.
Oh, that place was an oasis. Remember the jasmine blooming all around us?
And the tea tasted better just because of the setting.
It just goes to show, the hidden gems of Istanbul aren't just places, they're experiences.
Now, before we get too lost in reverie, what's coming up next for our listeners, Luca?
Prepare to have your minds blown, as next, we'll unfold some of Istanbul's strangest and most intriguing weird facts. Stay with us. Must-see places in Istanbul. Now there's a segment that's bound to stir some wanderlust.
Absolutely, Luca. When you think must-see, you can't skip over the iconic Taksim Square. It's the pulsing heart of modern Istanbul, wouldn't you say?
Without a doubt. Taksim is a crossroads of sorts, the past meeting the future, tradition swirling with change. It's vibrant any time of the day.
And it leads right to Istiklal Avenue. Remember that time we tried to count all the shops and gave up after reaching 1,000?
How could I forget? Istiklal is a torrent of cultures, a feast for the senses lined with boutiques, bookshops, art galleries, cinemas, you name it.
There's something very cosmopolitan about Istiklal, reflecting the diversity of this grand city.
Speaking of reflections, remember gazing at the Süleymaniye Mosque's majestic dome and its perfect harmony?
The Süleymaniye Mosque really is the epitome of Ottoman architecture, not just a place of worship, but a symbol of Istanbul's skyline.
And it's forever tied to the great architect Sinan. His mastery in design is no more evident than there. The way light dances through the interior is pure poetry.
It is, and shifting from grandeur to opulence, we have the Dolmabahce Palace. You know, I heard they used 14 tons of gold leaf in its decoration.
14 tons? That's enough gold to make even King Midas blush. The palace is a stark contrast from the Ottoman austerity, bridging into the modern era.
You can almost imagine the sultans walking the lavish halls. They say Mustafa Kemal Ataturk's presence still lingers, don't they?
Yes, Dolmabahce is where he spent his final days. Such a poignant piece of history.
From sultans to mystical whirling dervishes, the captivating aura of the Galata Tower next, where legend meets the eye, quite literally.
Indeed, it's said that if you climb to the top of the tower with your beloved, you're destined to be together forever.
That's a legend for the romantics for sure, but the view is actually something to fall in love with on its own. Breathtaking doesn't do it justice.
The Galata Tower is a testament to Istanbul's endurance, standing tall through the centuries.
From any of Istanbul's hills, you can see it, like a beacon guiding the weary traveler to the shores of the Golden Horn.
Ah, the Golden Horn, where past meets present and east meets west.
Istanbul really is a treasure trove of must-see places. But even with its endless delights, there's always more to discover, like the weird, wonderful facts waiting in our next segment.
So Lara, we've wandered through the historic streets, savored the flavors, and shared our secret spots. Dare I say it's time for some weird facts about Istanbul?
Absolutely, Luca. I love this part. Did you know Istanbul is the only city in the world that straddles 2 continents?
Oh, that's a classic, but wait until you hear this. Istanbul has the 3rd oldest subway in the world, built in 1875. It's called the Tunnel, and it's ridiculously short, but charming.
That's adorable. It's like the city's own quirky elevator. But here's one. There are no native flamingos in Istanbul, right? Well, sometimes in spring, flamingos stop by the city during their migration. It's as if they're tourists, too.
Istanbul, the pit stop for jet-setting flamingos. I love it. Now, how about the fact that tulips, often associated with the Netherlands, actually originated from here, and the Ottoman Turks brought them to the world's attention?
Turkey did give us the tulip mania, indeed. And what about the Maiden's Tower? Legend has it, an emperor built it to protect his daughter from a deathly prophecy, only for her to perish from a venomous snake hidden in a basket of grapes.
Classic twist of fate. Speaking of snakes, the basilica cistern with its Medusa heads, why are they sideways and upside down anyway?
Ah, the mystery deepens beneath Istanbul. Some say it's to negate the power of Medusa's gaze, while others believe it was simply because the blocks were reused and it just fit that way.
Practicality over myth, perhaps. But then we have the Hagia Sophia, where history, religion, and cats combine. It's said that cats are allowed to roam freely there because Prophet Muhammad also favored them. One feline even became a social media star.
Cats conquering social media. That's a tale as old as the internet itself. Now, how about this? Istanbul has a whopping population of over 15 million. But back in 1502, Leonardo da Vinci proposed to build a bridge over the Golden Horn. It would have been the world's longest bridge at that time.
Leonardo's ambitious spirit lives on, doesn't it? Imagine if he had Twitter back then. Here's another one. A sacred relic, the Staff of Moses, is said to be housed in Istanbul's Topkapı Palace, amidst other treasured items like Prophet Muhammad's cloak.
So divine artifacts share the city with flamingos and contrarian Medusa heads, only in Istanbul. Okay, get this, the name Istanbul derives from a Greek phrase eistin poli, which means to the city. Because why would you want to go anywhere else?
That's right, all roads lead to Istanbul apparently. And in a city this alluring, who could blame them?
Oh, Luca, have you heard the one about the Galata Tower? Some say it's where the first man ever to fly took off. Hezarfen Ahmed Çelebi, wings attached, leaped and actually glided over the Bosphorus.
Ah, the original flying Turk. And what about the largest church-turned-mosque now museum, Hagia Sophia, harboring Viking graffiti? Some Norse visitor felt the need to carve Halfdan was here on the upper gallery walls.
Halfdan, the original tourist, leaving his mark. Now, for a modern oddity, Istanbul is home to the world's highest density mall, cramming over 500 stores into less than 500,000 square feet, for those who take retail therapy seriously.
Imagine the queue for coffee there. How about this? The city was once swarmed by parrots. Yes, real live squawking parrots which had escaped and then thrived here.
From flamingos to parrots, Istanbul's skies are a colorful tapestry. I've got one fitting for the silver screen. Istanbul has a building that starred in 2 Bond films, decades apart.
That's our iconic Hagia Sophia again, playing backdrop to espionage and intrigue. Lara, I think we've uncovered enough of Istanbul's wild side for one day.
Indeed, and there's yet more to unravel. Stay tuned as we delve into the rich, intricate tapestry of Istanbul's history next.
And steeped in legend as much as in reality, Istanbul's history is a rich tapestry that chronicles empires and epochs. Wouldn't you agree, Lara?
Absolutely, Luca. This city has seen the rise and fall of civilizations and is the only city in the world that straddles two continents.
Let's begin with Byzantium, the city's earliest recorded name. It's like something out of a high fantasy novel.
It does have a dramatic ring to it, and it's quite appropriate considering Byzantium's founding myth involves a king, an oracle, and a sea voyage commanded by the Delphic oracle.
Ah yes, King Byzas, who allegedly founded the city in 667 BC, if my memory of lore doesn't betray me.
And it doesn't, Luca. But let's fast forward to one of the most crucial eras, the Roman times. And what a character we have as Istanbul's pivot, the great Constantine I.
A name that echoes through history, no doubt. He established Nova Roma here, but the city soon took on his name, becoming Constantinople.
And that's just a tiny slice of the narrative. This city has been the capital of 4 different empires: the Roman, the Byzantine, the Latin, and finally the Ottoman.
4 empires, Lara? That's quite the number, and I can only imagine each left its own indelible stamp on the city.
Indeed. For over 1,000 years, Constantinople was the wealthiest and largest city in Europe.
A beacon of knowledge and the arts, right? I've always thought of it as the library of antiquities' most refined literary works.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Scholars and poets alike found refuge within its walls, especially during the city's golden age under Emperor Justinian.
The very same emperor who was responsible for the architectural marvel, the Hagia Sophia, no less.
And let's not forget the mighty Theodosian walls, which protected the city against countless sieges until the fateful day of May 29, 1453.
Ah, you're stepping into the epoch when cannons and gunpowder changed the art of warfare. That day, Lara, marked the fall of Constantinople.
A historical moment that haunts history lovers like us. The city's vast knowledge was looted or destroyed, and it passed into the hands of the Ottoman Turks.
Indeed, Lara. Mehmed the Conqueror saw the city's potential and vowed to revitalize it, transforming it into the capital of his sprawling empire.
And you must admit, Luca, Istanbul bloomed under the Ottomans. Mosques, bazaars, and beautiful palaces like the Topkapi.
Absolutely. The city became a melting pot of cultures, languages, and religions. Such diversity led to a blend of architecture, cuisine, and science.
But let's not make the mistake of thinking history ends with empires. Even without emperors, Istanbul keeps evolving.
True that, and must we mention the city's modern-day incarnation? Ataturk's reforms brought a new dawn upon Turkey, and Istanbul became a contemporary metropolis.
And the name? Officially changed to Istanbul in 1930, embracing its identity beyond the empires.
It serves as both a modern-day hub and a custodian of its antiquities. A city where a digital billboard and an ancient minaret share the skyline.
Yet, what fascinates me, Luca, is how present the past is. Every cobblestone, every spice in the bazaar tells stories.
Stories that resonate with the rhythm of the sea strait it's nestled by. Mark my words, Lara, Istanbul will continue to write history for centuries to come.
Profoundly, Luca. And with that, we've only scratched the surface of Istanbul's historical intrigue.
Next up, dear listeners, Lara will share her expertise on navigating the city like a local pro. From the best street eats to crossing the Bosphorus, she's got the tips.
Ah, the travel hacks of Istanbul. Well, brace yourself, Luca, because our next segment, Expert Travel Tips, is going to be as informative as it is entertaining.
And shimmying right along to a segment that's all about savvy city strutting, it's time for our expert travel tips for all you Istanbul wanderers out there.
Ah, the secret sauce of travel. How to avoid looking like a bewildered tourist with your map upside down. Let's kick off with tip number 1, navigating the attractions. You know that early bird, Luca?
Gets the worm, or in this case, a serene moment with the sights. Yes, Getting to popular spots like Hagia Sophia right at opening can make a world of difference to your experience. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. You get to enjoy a bit of tranquility before the torrent of tourists pours in. But here's another tip. If you're not a morning person, try visiting about an hour before closing. A lot of people don't, aiming for a full day out instead.
Spot on. And tip number 2, transit. The Istanbul card. This magic little card is your key to the city. Buses, trams, ferries, even the funicular. It's got you covered.
Ah, the funicular. What a quaint ride. And another tip for the Istanbul cart. Load it with more than you think you need. Any leftover credit? Just pass it on to another traveler. Start the circle of travel karma.
Generosity. Lara, your middle name. Now diving into the nuances of the Grand Bazaar, this is tip number 3. Mastering the ancient art of haggling. The unspoken rule? Start at 50% of the asking price and bask in the back and forth banter.
Is that how you got that gorgeous lamp at half price?
Guilty as charged, but it's about humor and respect too. And don't be shy to walk away. Sometimes that's when the best deals strike.
Which brings me to tip number 4, attire. Respect is key in this city of culture. For women, having a scarf handy is great, especially if you're visiting mosques. And comfy shoes, those cobbled streets are unforgiving.
Comfort over style, sometimes they can coexist. Coming to tip number 5, eating out. The meyhanes are fantastic for experiencing the real Turkish tavern vibe. Try outlining your food order in Turkish, even if it's just biraz, meaning a little.
Your pronunciation has improved. Speaking of which, tip number 6, learn a few Turkish phrases. Teşekkürler for thank you, lütfen for please. Trust me, it works wonders.
It's all about effort. They appreciate it. And for tipping, while we are on the topic, the norm here is about 5 to 10%. It's not compulsory, but it's polite, especially if the service impresses you.
And it usually will. Now what's our lucky number 7, Luca?
Our 7th tip, tech to the rescue. Download the Butaxi app. It's the Istanbul version of ride-hailing apps and ensures you don't get the scenic route, unless you want it, of course.
I love a scenic route, but on my own terms. Ooh, tip number 8, tea gardens. Find one, sit down, and just absorb. You'll see life in motion. It's like a live Turkish soap opera.
Bring your finest tea-sipping etiquette to the fore. Last but not least, tip 9, safety. Keep your belongings close in busy areas, but know that Istanbul is generally a safe city. Just use common sense, folks.
Now, just like that feeling when you find an extra Turkish delight hidden in your pocket,
we've sweetly reached the end of our travel tips segment. Always remember, though, the best tip is to travel with an open heart and mind, right, Lara?
Couldn't have put it better myself. And guess what, fellow Globetrotters?
Oh, I can hardly wait.
Next up, we'll whisk you away from the city bustle as we chat about those tempting side excursions from Istanbul. Ever wanted to stare across the mystic Dardanelles?
Or have your very own aha moment in the ruins of ancient civilizations? Well, you're in for a treat. And here we are at one of my favorite parts of the show, the side excursions. Istanbul is amazing, but there's a world to explore just beyond the city limits. Isn't there, Lara?
Absolutely, Luca. Sometimes the best-kept secrets are just a short journey away. So tell me, where shall we whisk our listeners first on our day trip extravaganza?
Well, let's start with the Prince's Islands, a serene escape from the city's hustle and bustle. Just a ferry ride away, these islands are a haven of tranquility and no cars allowed. Imagine the sound of horse-drawn carriages and the sight of Victorian cottages. It's like stepping into a different era.
Oh, it's idyllic. You know, my favorite is Buyukada, the largest island. Last time I rented a bike and just lost myself in the pine-scented breeze along the shoreline. It's so peaceful, you can hear your own thoughts.
Speaking of tranquil spots, have you ever been to the ancient city of Troy? It's a bit further out, but so worth the trip for any history buff.
I did. And Luca, walking through those ruins, I was half expecting Achilles to round the corner at any moment. The layers of history there, with each excavation revealing another civilization stacked upon the last. It's like peeling back the pages of time.
So poetic, Lara. And imagine, they thought it was just a myth until Schliemann dug his shovel into the earth and found Troy's treasures waiting patiently.
But let's not forget the natural beauty. Turkey's North Anatolian countryside is dotted with these verdant hills that just roll into the distance. and the small coastal towns like Şile and Ava, they're the perfect scenic backdrop for unwinding.
You're spot on. Those towns offer some of the best seafood too. I remember sitting by the Black Sea, the air tinged with salt, and savoring the freshest fish I've ever had.
And for those with a penchant for poignant history, there's Gallipoli. The tranquility of the place today stands in stark contrast to its past. It's a profound place to reflect and pay respects to the soldiers who fought there.
I felt a deep sense of reverence walking those battlefields, Lara. It's incredibly moving, and the memorials are a stark reminder of our shared history.
Yes, and to end the day, nothing beats the calm, sunset cruise along the Bosphorus. With Europe on one side, Asia on the other, you're literally between two continents. It's the perfect place to contemplate the day's adventures.
That's Istanbul for you, always between worlds. The city straddles not just continents, but time, history, and culture. It's the crossroads of everything that ever was and will be.
Well said, Luca. And if you thought these side trips were gems, wait until the next segment where we'll conclude our journey through Istanbul and leave you with some final musings.
That's right. We'll wrap up with our personal reflections on this city that's captured our hearts, and possibly yours too. Stay with us for the final thoughts in our Istanbul saga. We've reached that moment where we must wrap up our enchanting journey through Istanbul, the city where continents collide and history whispers at every turn.
Oh, Istanbul. You've been such a gracious host to our tales and wanderlust. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, even with everything we've covered today.
It's true, Lara. Our words can only attempt to capture the soul of such a vibrant metropolis. And yet I hope we've given our listeners that taste, that hunger to see Istanbul through their own eyes.
Hunger, indeed. And I'm not just talking about the kebabs and baklava we discussed in segment 2, but a hunger for the layers of history, the artistic streets, and the mystique of the Bosphorus.
As we bid our farewell for this episode, Lara, my thoughts turn to the sunset over the Golden Horn. Remember how the water seemed to turn into liquid gold and the sky transformed into a myriad of colors?
How could I forget? There's poetry in those moments, Luca, the kind that even our most eloquent expressions can barely do justice.
True that. And the people of Istanbul. Their warmth is the city's heartbeat, always embracing, always with a story to share.
Ah, yes. It's those spontaneous conversations in bustling markets or those shared smiles in cozy tea gardens that often become the most cherished memories.
But we mustn't forget, as much as our hearts belong to those places we've mentioned, it's the places we've simply passed by, the scent in the air, the light touch of the breeze. That's what lingers in the soul.
I'm feeling quite poetic myself now, Luca. Istanbul does that to you. Leaves you weaving verses in its honor long after you've departed its shores.
That it does, Lara. And for those of you listening, I hope when you navigate the cobblestoned lanes or gaze upon minarets touching the sky, you'll find a piece of Istanbul that whispers directly to you.
And we can't wait to hear all about it. Please share your stories, your discoveries, your hidden treasures. Let's keep this conversation, this connection to Istanbul, alive together.
As we part ways for now, my mind already wanders to our next destination. Another locale rich with history and begging to be explored.
But we'll leave that a secret for just a little longer. So as you ponder your future adventures, remember to keep Istanbul in your travel dreams, nestled between the Europe you know and the Asia you long to discover.
Thank you all for tuning in to Travel with Lara and Luca. It's been an absolute pleasure leading you through the mystical streets of Istanbul.
And don't forget to join us next time when we'll be unraveling the mysteries and delights of another breathtaking destination.
Until then, my fellow travelers, may your roads be safe, your hearts curious, and your cameras ready to capture the magic.
Goodbye for now, but not forever. Here's to our paths crossing again, perhaps over a cup of Turkish tea with a view of the Bosphorus.
Or why not in the shadow of some ancient ruins, our laughter echoing in the hallways of history. Farewell, dear listeners, and keep the spirit of travel alive.